Hey, I'm Doug. This is Backcountry Pilgrim, a channel devoted to hiking, backpacking, camping, the Camino, and all kinds of things outside. If you're into that stuff, hit the subscribe button, and then we will get started. All right, so let's talk for a minute about heat exposure and the kinds of things that can happen to you while you're hiking. The first thing that most people think about is dehydration, and this is basically where your body no longer has the amount of water inside it in your bloodstream to pull out and cool you off when you're getting hot. The way the human body has been designed is that when you start to get hot, it pulls water out of your bloodstream and converts it into sweat. That sweat goes on the outside of your skin and cools you off through convection. There's basically two ways to cool down when you're hot. You can either come in contact with something cold, like a bag of ice or sitting in a river, or you can cool off by having evaporation take place from your sweat in a decent little breeze. Now the problem, of course, is that if you don't have enough liquid inside your body to come out as sweat, you're going to have a serious problem regulating your temperature. So hydration is incredibly important. You've got to replace the fluids that are coming out as sweat so that your body can use that system that it has been designed to use to regulate your temperature. Now, most people have a pretty good handle on hydration. I've seen different formulas about how much you should drink while you're hiking. Some say you divide your weight in half, and that's the number of ounces you should be drinking every hour. Some people just say, about a liter an hour is fine. The fact of the matter is, everybody's different. People sweat at different rates. You're going to kind of have to learn that yourself, but this is definitely an area where it's better to be safe than sorry. And even though water carry is one of the heaviest parts of your loadout, it is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Now, a lot of people will tell you that by the time you're thirsty, it's already too late. You're already dehydrated. That's not necessarily true. Your body is not lying to you. If you don't feel thirsty, you're probably doing okay. However, the truth behind the statement is that it's better to continuously be replenishing liquids than waiting until you're thirsty and then trying to pound a whole bunch of water at once. The body doesn't absorb as well that way. That can cause stomach cramps, it can affect digestion. It's just not a great idea. However, there are actually bigger dangers than dehydration. Dehydration is not so much of a problem as that it can lead to other problems. You kind of have this rule of thumb about how long you can go without certain things. You might be able to go 3 minutes without air, you might be able to go 3 hours without warmth, and what I typically hear is 3 days without water and 3 weeks without food. Now, of course, everybody's different and you don't want to take this as gospel truth, but it does help with kind of the hierarchy of survival. What are the things you should be focused on? So if you get lost out in the woods or you're out somewhere where you shouldn't be, it's a lot more important to have water than it is to have food, whereas you're not going to make it very long without hydration. However, there are actually bigger dangers than dehydration. While dehydration is a problem, there is a bigger problem, which is exposure and temperature. One of the problems you can run into is called heat exhaustion, and this is basically when the sweat engine of your body is starting to fail. It's starting to not be able to keep up with the amount of heat that you are either generating internally by your exercise or that you are receiving from the hot sun and reflection off rocks or sand or whatever. An analogy might be if you've ever been driving your car and you look down and you see that the temperature gauge is pegged into the hot side. The car hasn't stopped running yet, but you know you better do something or there's going to be trouble. Now, the human body reacts with certain symptoms if it is getting into heat exhaustion. First of all, you're sweating a lot. Your skin gets just clammy and wet and gross. You're probably starting to get headaches, muscle cramps. You might even start to have a very rapid pulse and get nauseous. This is your body's sign that you are too hot. Now, one of the ways to fight heat exhaustion is to hydrate. However, because you have probably lost a lot of your liquid through sweat, you haven't just lost water, you've also lost salt. You've lost sodium. And that is a very important ingredient in your body's health. So, when hiking when it's hot, while water is extremely important, you also need to be replenishing your salts. And you can do that by eating salty snacks. You can get salt tablets that you can drop in your water, or you can just drink sport drinks that are loaded with electrolytes. But keep in mind that you can still get heat exhaustion or heat stroke even if you're hydrated, because these things are caused by your body getting too hot. And sweating can't overcome everything. It is possible to simply get too hot for your sweat to be able to compensate. And so while hydration is important, it's not going to save you from heat exhaustion or the next level up, which we'll talk about in a minute, heat stroke. So what do you do if you start experiencing dizziness, headache, cramps, you're starting to get a little nauseous? Okay, you know that you are now in the realm of heat exhaustion. It is time to pull over, get in some shade, either under a tree or some portable shade that you bring with you. You might want to lie down, kick your feet up on your backpack, and start hydrating and just, open up some clothes. It's just simply time for you to cool down. If you can get to water and get your feet in there without increasing exposure to the sun, that's a great idea too. You need to get back to some kind of equilibrium or you're going to be in trouble. Now, what if for whatever reason you can't do those things and you continue on? You are looking at the possibility of heat stroke. Now, heat stroke is a deadly situation. You need to call 911. You need to be rescued. How do you know when you have gone from heat exhaustion to heat stroke? Well, number one, you might not. It literally can cause stroke-like symptoms and you might just go down and that could be the end for you. This is why it's so important to start dealing with heat problems as soon as they appear and not waiting until they get worse. Signs of heat stroke include a lot of the same kinds of symptoms that heat exhaustion does, but some of them switch. So for example, while you might find yourself dizzy and, kind of like passing out a little bit with heat exhaustion, with heat stroke, you're actually going to start kind of losing it. Your brain may not be functioning as well as it should. You might have slurred speech. You might have difficulty thinking through things. And not because you have a headache or because you're a little dizzy, but because literally your brain is starting to fry. Whereas clammy, sweaty skin is an indication of heat exhaustion, by the time you reach heat stroke, you've probably stopped sweating. Your body is literally overheating. Now it's not just that the temperature gauge is all the way over to the H, it's that steam is starting to blow out your engine. Your car is about to seriously break down. And it's the same thing with your body. When you get to the point of heat stroke, your body is going into serious critical states. It could even be a coma. Temperature could exceed 104 degrees. It's just a bad situation. So if you're with somebody and they go from cold and clammy to hot and dry skin, you are in the heat stroke zone and it is time for a rescue. It is time to be evacuated. It is time to call 911. They are not going to be able to self-rescue. Basically, the only order of the day at this point is to cool down by any means necessary. Now, it might seem like a heat stroke victim should start drinking, but remember what we said. You can still be overheated even if you're hydrated. A heat stroke victim could actually be harmed by trying to drink. Now, if they can drink under their own power, in other words, if you can hand them a bottle and they can lift it up to their own lips and drink, then by all means, go for it. However, you don't want to be pouring liquid into them because if they go out, they could literally drown in the sport drink or the water that you're pouring down their throat. Further, hydration may not be the issue at this point. If they're in a heat stroke situation, they've got to get their body temperature cooled down. And again, what that means is either coming in contact with something cold, like if there's a river nearby, go get them in it. Now, don't put yourself or them in a situation where if you pass out or they pass out, they're going to drown. But if you can get them submerged in water and start cooling their body down, splash it on them, fan them, you might need to take their clothes off. This is no longer the time for small measures. You are in a desperate life or death situation at this point, and you need to do whatever you need to do to cool them down. And finally, let's talk about some conditions that you need to watch out for on the trail when you know it's going to be hot. Often exposure is the big issue. So of course, that's when you're going to want to wear the clothes that keep your exposure to a minimum. However, another thing to consider is when exactly are you hiking? Now, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, it's going to be cooler than it is in the middle of the day. That wedge between 12 and 3 is a pretty bad time to be out when it's hot. That's a good time to find some shade, maybe take a little siesta, and continue moving when it's a lot less hot. However, what if you're climbing up and down a peak? Whereas the thinner atmosphere creates a bigger problem for exposure up high, it also makes it less likely that you're going to have to deal with a lot of heat. The problem is, as you come down in the elevation, although exposure becomes less of an issue, heat becomes a bigger issue. If you're coming down off the mountain in the hottest part of the day, you're not only dealing with exposure, but you're also going to hike into more and more and more heat as you get lower and lower in elevation. All right, well, I hope this has helped you out. I hope it is going to make your hot hiking a lot more pleasant and a lot more safe. Again, my name is Doug. This is Backcountry Pilgrim. If you like the video, I would appreciate it if you would indicate that by clicking the like button, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and click that bell so that you know the next time a video drops. Until next time, take it easy.